Cry It Out Loud is not about me. It is not about my baby who died or my own birth trauma or my daughter's life. This is the first podcast that is about living and what life is like after we have gone through these traumatic births, fertility, pregnancy, and baby losses. It's about armoring ourselves so we aren't caught off guard or having a more unexpected feeling when we are going back to our routine lives and returning to society, being out in public, and facing the world. It's about getting different survivors' perspectives on uncomfortable aspects of living that aren't shared or talked about until they occur. But it's when we don't have the bandwidth or the mental capability to be able to come up with our own survivor network. So we don't want you to be caught off guard when these things do happen at all different points of all different journeys throughout our lifetime. We talk about what pregnancy is like after loss, what parenting is like after loss, what life is like after loss at all different points of all different journeys. It's about helping, uniting, and supporting all of us fellow survivors together. We are uncovering heart-shattering and gut-wrenching personal survivor stories for their first times, with reliving those first minutes, hours, darkest of days after their own traumatic loss, in hopes that we are helping other fellow survivors with how to face different important dynamics that shift after our losses for all of us to hear. These are things happening in spaces where we least expect it, within our communities, our society, close relationships, families, friend circles, at all different stages throughout our lifetime. And we are also unique in what we experience, how we process loss, how we cope with it, and where we go from here. And that's why we're bringing a variety of topics from a variety of lived experiences in hopes that you find a connection here. We are bridging that gap for holistic connection for all those living through a lifetime of grief, united from our losses, but being stronger together. What we don't want is for all those living through these losses to have that same isolation, alone feeling like most of us have felt at one point or another in different points of our journey. We suffered in silence, but are putting an end to it. As part of our healing process for our listeners, we will feature a monthly Ask Me Anything segment with a maternal fetal medicine doctor. We will discuss medical complications from including endometriosis, uterine rupture, PCOS, ectopic pregnancies, multiples, cancers, just to name a few. But things you wish you would have asked during our time of our loss, during that chaos and whirlwind of just emotions and where do we go from here? It's discussions that we wish we would have had when we were at the hospitals, in our doctor's appointments, fertility clinics during that time to help with us to process and heal. And we want to put a voice behind maternal fetal health, traumatic losses, by cracking the silence and giving us survivors some peace. When I returned to everyday life, I felt like I was in the middle of a white, huge, open room, sitting in a chair, having hundreds of people, all my friends and family circling around me, looking at me, nodding, and looking so compassionate as I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, asking and pleading, begging, asking for help, not even knowing what I need or how I need it, just knowing that I do need it. And here's the thing. I should not have to do this alone or come up with my own survivor network when I'm already just trying to figure out what life is or who I am after we just went through all of these traumatic events that just occurred. Grief doesn't just go away to fit into our convenient life schedules. And that's why back in September of 2022, after a bunch of us survivors came together and said enough is enough without having this daily support, and I founded Chasing the Rainbows, which is a nonprofit offering 2 to 3 peer-to-peer lived daily virtual support groups, individual mentorships, resources, materials, warm handoffs for professional services to us survivors. This podcast is just an extension of that, being another coping method to help support us survivors and bring us all together. We are always with you, fertility, pregnancy, and baby loss survivors, walking along this journey of life after our own birth traumas, after all these traumatic events. So please stay tuned next week for our first episode.